Hi, James, and welcome to Career Mobility for April 2024. Can you believe it?
I can barely believe it. We are now the other side of Easter officially.
I
So
know.
too much chocolate, too much red wine, common theme over Easter. But it was so nice to have a break because,
Yeah,
gosh, it's gone quick and it's been a really busy yet productive start to the year.
it certainly has. And certainly one of the things we're going to talk today is about the change that we're seeing. So, for myself, I'm having conversations, of course, with people who are going through career transition, but also with recruiters, with employers. And everybody is really the conversation that I'm having with everybody is about how change is happening within their organization. It's around process, it's around systems, but it's also around the people. And of course, we have been busier than ever before in the last 18 months in terms of career transition. So, it's been a fiercely busy time around that sort of change within organizations. What are you seeing sort of and hearing, I guess, on the grapevine at your end?
Yeah, look, that theme, it's back to that old expression, the only constant thing is change. And it
Yeah,
really feels like that's the case both for me internally, so things that are happening within Adecco Group and within LHH globally, but then especially externally in the market. And so for our audience, what are the things that are most pertinent and most relevant? After, as you just referred to, probably the busiest 18 months, definitely in the 5 years I've been involved in the business, which
yeah,
has been driven by two things. The change has been driven by overhiring when it was seen to be better than expected market post COVID. And so the economy was still flooded with all of the money that was put in to actually wash through COVID. And then, individuals had high savings levels and were just wanting to get out and live life
yeah,
again after all the restrictions. And so there was this almost golden patch of huge amounts of hiring. And then the last 18 months has been this real correction based on either needing to bring cost back down for a lot of organizations, seeing sort of tougher outlooks when it comes to their revenue lines. It's been cost
yeah,
based, it's been structurally based. So whether that's nearshoring, offshoring, altering the way things are done, or even automation, they've been the two drivers over the last 18 months. What we have seen when we talk about change, just really in some of the discussions I've been having recently as part of the broader Adecco Group executive meetings, is
yeah.
starting to see a shift back towards higher recruitment demand. So that's hopefully good news to everyone who's listening, that we're just starting to see the word that was used was green shoots.
No,
So
I like
don't
that.
go, don't go out there expecting like job boards are full and like spot for choice and that the dynamic has completely changed, but there's definitely something starting to.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost call it cautious recruitment. I think it's that sense of, we're seeing that people have been having to wear sort of two and three hats, in organizations. We know that's not sustainable. And yeah, strategically, what are the roles that are actually going to add value? So I actually, there's a new term that I've also picked up on recently, James, and it's that thing of not necessarily the hidden market, which is of course that potential bank of jobs, which really, frankly, right now doesn't exist out there. There are not many roles really that are there that aren't actually on job boards. But more the early job market. So how do we help people who are going through career transition to start to, utilize all of this fantastic sort of networking and early understanding of the job market? We obviously give information in things like the job bulletin, which is a monthly publication, which you can get access to via CRN. That's actually for 20 different countries. So if you're looking for international mobility or information, you can get that too. As well as locally here in the market in Australia and New Zealand, we have, people have access to our sort of pretty much almost daily updated LinkedIn group, which provides that information about what's happening now. And, there is, the reality is there's so much, never a dull day in recruitment land. And as we were speaking about earlier, it's been both recruitment that's sort of had some tough times over the last 18 months, as well as talent acquisition, which means those teams are smaller, but what I'm starting to hear from our clients going through career transition is that the impact is on the experience they're having when they're going through recruitment processes. Again, I don't know if you've heard anything about this, but it's we're starting to see really long recruitment processes, and they're not always managed well.
Yeah, so I'll start with the change that has happened in sort of the numbers, and whether that's for agency recruiters or whether that's for internal talent acquisition teams. The same thing has happened over the last 18 months where like job requests have just dropped massively. And so there's been a lot of people leave the industry, either for short periods of time or potentially free. And so you've now got this combination of a lesser number of recruiters in market as things start to pick back up, because it's been pretty tough times. They've got higher volumes of applicants coming through that they need to deal with. Managers and organisations are feeling like that there's been a real shift in the last 18 months and things are back on their terms, and it's more of an employer's market than a candidate's market. And so all these things coming together means you've probably got smaller recruitment teams who, as things pick up, are going to struggle and feel a little bit overworked and under capacity. And so that you often see that come through in candidate care response times or responses at all. That then flows through to longer processes where there might be more interviews or extra steps involved because the employer feels like there's not the same urgency or competition in the market to get to an offer as quickly as they used to. And then even right down to when it comes up to negotiating around offers. And so whether that's how the work's going to be done, so level of flexibility or hybrid nature of working, or whether that's down to total REM, so and benefits and those components of the discussion. But it's fascinating. I went to a Agile Leaders Summit just a couple of weeks ago, and this topic of flexibility is a huge one. And so one thing for all those people going through a process, when they were talking about the legislational updates, and this is Australia-wide, that there is likely to be, so every employer, as much as they can set a preferred working style, they need to be also very careful, whether it's in a selection process or whether it's for an existing employee, not to discriminate where the grounds for a flexible work request is reasonable.
Fair enough,
Just useful for people to know, because we've really started to see a lot of media hype around people's bonuses being attached to time in office. But how that links back to what we're just talking about is it's less recruiters, so it requires more follow-up. You've got to always think both sides of the coin, right? So less of them, things are picking up. Are they stressed? Are they getting back to me because I haven't got the job, or are they not getting back to me because they're too busy? So maybe a little bit more follow-up and adjusting your strategy to the market change. Second, like longer processes. Not a huge amount can be done with it, but I mean, ultimately, just making sure that you actually ask them to ensure you're prepared for the extra steps. So the number one thing I always say to anyone in a process is attending a interview with James McIlvena without any background and context, or just look him up on LinkedIn. Why is he interviewing me? Is there anything specific I need to prepare? What's expected? Do you understand what type of questions he's going to be asking me? Is this a formal or an informal discussion? Right? Those type of things, because way too many people get sort of caught out with that. Just catch up with James. It's an informal discussion because it's the fifth person you've met in the process. And the next thing you know, James is firing competency-based questions and giving you a skill assessment. You're like, whoa, hang on, I wasn't prepared for that. But you're on the clock, you're being assessed. So there was a lot in that response, but there are a lot of the trends we're regularly seeing coming back to us.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think at the moment, our best advice for anyone listening to this is, the more questions you can ask. We understand though that it's challenging. When you're speaking to recruiters right now, they are probably pushed for time. Not that they want to provide good service, but there's less of them. I know of certain internal recruiters who are handling way more roles per individual than they ever used to, and they're still expected to obviously hit those sort of KPIs and make sure that the talent is flowing in those areas of the business. So it's definitely something to be aware of, and at the same time, of course, we all want that common courtesy, and we all want to do a good job. We want to know that we're working with good people in the process, but also when we're actually in the interview, making a good impact, and ideally, obviously, if it's a role that you want, landing that role. So yeah, I agree with you, James. Asking questions and being on top of that is good.
And the change, just for comparison, so people can sort of understand, the how and the why.
Yeah.
You went from in 2021 and 2022 an environment where for every role, just as an example, you might have 100 responses to that role.
Yeah.
Through all of last year and into this year, recruiters are reporting that you'll have at least double, sometimes triple,
the
number of applicants to deal with, but less recruiters. So
exactly.
That's the dynamic that's driving a lot of this stuff. Hence, to the point I was trying to make, which is, they don't mind. I've done it. I've been on the tools doing recruitment. Whenever someone would get onto me and say, "Look, James, you owe me an answer on," or first response would always be, "So sorry, either here's the update or let me look into it for you." So I can tell you from lived experience, they don't mind if they've given you a promise of a next step or a follow-up. I would suggest chase. That doesn't guarantee you an answer, but it does guarantee that you've controlled what you can control, which is actually not just letting it slide, because you've probably already invested a bunch of time up to that point. Don't let that time go to waste for the sake of a quick phone call or an email.
Oh, it's so true. And it's at the end of the day, we know people are putting a lot of time and effort into cover letters, modifying resumes, even just as a basics of application point, let alone the follow-ups, the interviews, the interview preparation, all of those things. So
assessments, like you could be 15, 20 hours in. At a minimum. And that's early in a process, a reasonably simple process. So what's an extra email or an extra call would be my recommendation, just to make sure that that time spent isn't lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's not lost on me that I have spoken to people recently who have essentially feeling like they've, we were, being ghosted by the recruiter, which to me, it's just not acceptable. I think I know the reasons why it's happening, but it's not, there could be well-being issues on the side of the recruiter. But these things need to be addressed. We saw it, as we spoke about prior to setting this up, about the ghosting in the industry that happened from candidates. They were fielding multiple offers potentially during COVID, and then sort of in the last minute, I guess said, sorry, no, I've got a better offer. So it's it swings and roundabouts, unfortunately, in the market. But where we do find ourselves at the moment is, as you've said, follow up, because that's where you're going to get, you need to do that. And frankly, if people don't come back to you, I mean, obviously, you might want to try multiple people if you're not getting a response from one particular individual. But if you find it systemic within the organization, maybe they're not the right employer for you.
Yeah. And honestly, Dia, I've never not worked for everyone, but I've never worked for an organization or an agency where there has been anything other than a requirement that everyone receives a response and everyone deserves follow-up and everyone deserves valuable feedback. And the two things out of what we've just discussed, which if I was to put a finer point on it for key takeaways, which are pretty good key takeaways for whatever you're doing, not just in recruitment processes, right? One, which is hopefully what we've just covered off, understand the context of what's going on and revise your plan and your strategy based on the context in which you find yourself. Yeah. So that would be the first one, is like, if you can understand the context, which we've shared, think about, what am I doing differently? Am I doing anything differently? Do I need to do anything differently? And then the second one is control the things you can control. You spend a lot of time worrying about stuff that is outside of your control, but what you can control is the next action you take. And so those two things, I think, are probably the key in where we started. What is a rapidly changing market? And I think the one thing where we started is the new norm is there's going to be consistent change. There's going to be a whole bunch of things that will layer complexity throughout the remainder of this year into how the talent acquisition and recruitment market reacts, as it goes from this change from being deemed to be probably more focused on the employer side back to candidates, becoming a little bit more scarce, particularly in certain skill sets and fields. And the final reminder is just make sure you can actually clearly articulate why you're a valuable asset when it comes to your skills, and always keep those skills current, because it's an amazing way, both while you're searching for roles or in a role, to ensure that you always stay current, and it aids internal mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know in these sessions, James, I always tend to go back to LinkedIn, but I will say that because of the change in the market and that need to constantly be, revising, really, it's a bit like being a student again, revising your plan, making sure that you're really clear about who's where. The wonderful thing about LinkedIn, the point I was going to make, is that it's probably the most up-to-date sort of CRM you're ever going to find, because people update their own details. So, the wonderful thing about it is once you're connected, even if they move, you're still connected. So, it's one of those places where, because even for us recently, I'm constantly obviously asking for, being asked for connections, and they're sort of looking to make those connections. People are moving around, and that's something that, is not going to change. And I think it's going to probably even happen more. So, part and parcel of the market.
So just on that, it's been a long time since I've seen so many, those standard LinkedIn congratulations new role announcements.
Yeah.
I have noticed a significant pickup in those.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely change happening in that regard. And again, it's always going to be ebb and flow. So look, our intention always in this conversation is to bring our insights. We're speaking to people, literally daily in this area, and we always want to bring value. So, we always say, if there's anything that, anyone would like to hear about specifically, pop it in the comments, with this recording. We'd love to hear from you. We always want to add value, and just always really appreciate your time, James.
Not a problem at all. And also, any topics that we haven't covered that people would really like to hear about, also pop those in the topics as well. So TJ and I always try and come up with things that are relevant for you, but if there's specific questions or themes that you would like us to cover, just let us know. We're happy to do it in next month's instalment.
Absolutely. Even if it means we've got to do a bit of research, we're happy to do it.
Love research.
Awesome. All right. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks so much. Thanks,
Cheers,
TJ.
James. See ya.
Bye.